Disruptive innovation is overhyped. The fact is that most successful companies don't become successful by being disruptive. You think of companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Ford, Disney, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, Netflix. All these companies became successful without being disruptive. And even though they are highly innovative, innovation for them means incremental improvement, not disruption. Disruption is rare, and it's hard to get right. Being disruptive means entering an existing market with a product or service that is so different from what already exists in that market that the value proposition is unclear or even non-existent to customers. You can argue that smartphones disrupted the mobile phone industry, but that's only because early smartphones didn't look or function like traditional phones. They were dramatically different. Once the smartphone market matured, however, innovation within the space became less about dramatic changes and more about incremental improvements. Think about the last 5 or 10 phones that you've owned. How many of them did you replace because they failed or broke? Probably very few. Most of them you replaced simply because there was a newer version available that had some extra features that you wanted. We call this process of incremental improvement evolutionary innovation. Evolutionary innovation is much easier than disruptive innovation because when you're just improving something that already exists, you're basing your efforts on something that has proven value to customers. In contrast, when you're trying to be disruptive, you have no such luxury. You're trying to create value where it currently doesn't exist. This is why Clayton Christensen's theory of disruption has been both so influential but also so misunderstood. What he actually said is that disruptive innovations often start out as inferior products that serve an underserved market really well. But because they start out as inferior products, mainstream customers don't take them seriously. He used the example of the personal computer. When the first personal computers hit the market in the late 1970s, they were considered toys rather than serious business tools. It wasn't until IBM entered the space in 1981 with a computer that was good enough for business use that the PC took off. The point here is that while disruptive innovations often start out as inferior products that serve a niche market really well, it's usually only when they catch up to or surpass what's available in the mainstream that they experience rapid adoption. So yes, PCs disrupted the computer industry, but it wasn't until the IBM PC that people started taking them seriously. And the iPhone isn't a good example either. Sure, the iPhone was different, but it wasn't an inferior product. Apple was a major player in the smartphone space before the iPhone, and the iPhone itself was actually more expensive than the BlackBerry at launch. So, what does all this mean for you? Well, if you want to innovate, you should focus on evolutionary innovation. It's easier and there's less risk. But what exactly does evolutionary innovation look like in practice? Let's look at one of the best examples, Toyota. If there's one thing that Toyota is known for, it's their incredible ability to improve their products incrementally year after year. Every single Toyota that gets released has small improvements over the previous iteration, but these small improvements add up to big differences over time. Since the original launch of the Toyota Corolla in 1966, 12 generations have been released. And while there was a pretty significant change going from the second to the third generation, each subsequent generation has built on the last, slowly improving the overall design, reliability, safety, and efficiency. What's really interesting about the Corolla is how it compares against the Honda Civic, its main competitor. While the Corolla has improved steadily over the years, the Civic has taken a much more sporadic approach to improvement. Early Civics were great cars, but the later models didn't quite live up to the hype. Honda fixed this problem in the mid-2000s, but since then, the Civic has once again started to fall behind the Corolla in terms of quality and reliability. The reason why Toyota is so much better at evolutionary innovation than Honda comes down to how they manage employee incentives. At Honda, managers are paid based on hitting quarterly targets, which incentivizes them to take actions that will maximize profits in the short term, like cutting costs. At Toyota, on the other hand, managers are paid based on long-term performance, so they're incentivized to invest in projects that pay off in the future, even if it means sacrificing short-term profits. For example, when Toyota found out that its suppliers were struggling to keep up with demand, instead of telling them to find ways to cut costs, Toyota's leadership helped them set up new production lines and train new employees. This allowed Toyota to maintain its high standards while also ensuring that its suppliers stayed profitable. Now, you might be wondering what this means for you. Well, if you want your organization to be good at evolutionary innovation, you need to change how you manage people. Specifically, you need to find a way to align their incentives with long-term success. The easiest way to do this is to link bonuses to long-term goals rather than short-term goals. Another way to ensure long-term success is to focus on building a strong corporate culture. A corporate culture that emphasizes learning and improvement will naturally be better at evolutionary innovation. This is why companies like Google and Apple are so successful at innovation. They have corporate cultures that emphasize experimentation and learning from failure. If evolutionary innovation is so much easier than disruptive innovation, why is it that we hear so much about disruptive innovation? Well, it's because of the way that venture capitalists think about investing in companies. Venture capitalists are looking for big returns on their investments, and the only way to get big returns is to invest in companies that are growing really fast. And the only type of company that grows really fast is the disruptive innovator. If you look at any VC-backed company, you'll see that they fit the textbook definition of a disruptive innovator. Take Uber, for example. Uber disrupted the taxi industry. Airbnb is disrupting the hospitality industry. Lyft is disrupting the taxi industry. DoorDash is disrupting the restaurant industry. Instacart is disrupting the grocery industry. Coinbase is disrupting the finance industry. SolarCity is disrupting the energy industry. WeWork is disrupting the real estate industry. And on and on and on. All these companies were funded by VCs, and all of them have one thing in common. They're trying to disrupt some existing industry. In fact, it's hard to think of a VC-backed company that isn't trying to disrupt something. Why is this? Well, venture capitalists have limited partners who want to see high returns on their investment. And the only way to get those high returns is to back companies that are growing really fast. And the only companies that grow really fast are the ones that are trying to disrupt something. So what does all this mean for you? Well, if you want to build a successful company, you shouldn't try to be disruptive. Instead, focus on providing small improvements to existing products. This is the path to sustainable success. If you want funding, you can always go to an angel investor or a VC. Just be prepared to have them tell you to go disrupt an industry. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe. It's free and helps us make more of this content. And if you want to learn more about how to grow your company, we have a ton of free resources on our website. See you next time.